to the process is Dr. Lisa Indar of the Caribbean Public Health Agency. Dr. Indar is the Assistant Director, Surveillance Diseases Prevention and Control Division at CARPHA, which is the sole integrated regional public health agency in the Caribbean that's responsible for preventing disease, promoting and protecting health in the Caribbean, and serving 26 countries. Now, CARPHA has been leading the Caribbean health response for the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Indar is responsible for directing and managing CARPHA's regional surveillance and response activities. And she's successfully leading the regional response, as is CARPHA, to COVID-19, working with heads of governments, various agencies, international, regional, and national multisectoral stakeholders, and really truly trying to keep the Caribbean safe. Our other presenter is Ms. Joan Leacock, a highly motivated and experienced trainer and education consultant with over 33 years global commercial experience in various aspects of the travel, tourism, and hospitality industry. Now, Joan is one of the training consultants with whom the CTO partners, and she assists the organization in the delivery of its training workshops in the areas of quality service, management of sites and attractions, successful taxi professional training, just to name a few. We also welcome Mrs. Kelly Meister with Blue Lagoon Island, Bahamas. Blue Lagoon Island is the home of Dolphin Encounters. It's a private island that provides guests with authentic, eco-friendly, sustainable Bahamian experiences through educational dolphin, sea lion, stingray, and shark programs. It also offers eco-nature walking tours and beach day activities. Mrs. Meister is here with us to share in a brief 5-minute testimony how they have been utilizing the guidelines that I mentioned earlier to support the protocols that their attraction has been establishing as it seeks to provide as safe as possible an environment for its workforce, as well as visitors to its site. So ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to post your questions in the Q&A section. And after the presentations, your questions will be read to the panelists by my colleague, Ms. Sharon Coward. Please do not place your questions in the chat section. Only utilize the Q&A section for any questions that you have. You can place them at any time during the course of the presentations. CARPHA will attempt to respond to as many as they can during this session. And what we're unable to get to because of a lack of time, we will seek to provide you with responses and send via email. So thank you all for being here, and I now hand it over to our first presenter, Dr. Indar.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you confirm you're hearing me?
Yes, we are hearing you. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm just going to go straight into the slide session. Okay. Don't know why I'm not. Okay, so is it that you can see this? Just want to know if you're seeing the slide.
Yes, we can see your PowerPoint.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to present today is to give you
Lisa, sorry to disturb. Can you put that into
yes,
slideshow mode? Great, thank you.
Right, good. Okay, so I'm going to go focus a bit on our health guidelines and a little more on focusing on sites and attractions. And of course, Joan will then follow up with the checklist in more detail. So a little bit of background just before we start. I'm sure we all know this, but this new coronavirus or COVID-19, we first saw it in December last year, and then somewhere around February, it was declared a public health emergency of international concern because of this rapid spread and because it was so new. And then on March 11, 2020, it was declared by the World Health Organization as a pandemic. And that's largely because it had spread to all the different regions in the world. And declaring it a pandemic allows for focal resources on it. So And because it's new, it's called a novel coronavirus. Some of the things we do need to know first, it's a virus. So it's different from a bacteria or parasite or other types of bugs in that viruses like the common cold virus tend to spread from person to person. So that's the big thing. And knowing that, we then know, well, why we have to stay apart from people. So it's spread by person to person contact. It belongs to the same family of coronavirus like those that cause severe acute respiratory syndrome, which is SARS and MERS and so on, which is Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome. However, like your children, you have all your children in the same family, but they're different. This is a new strain, and that is why it's called COVID-19. So when we are speaking, it's not just good enough to say COVID, but we need to say COVID-19 because it's specific, it's new, and we are still finding out a lot. So a lot of scientists are finding out about asymptomatic carriers, how long it stays on surface, and so on. So what I will present today is as up to date as we know, and of course, as new evidence comes, some of it may change. Now in the Caribbean, we have seen COVID in every single country. So let's start with that. However, we have been a bit different in that we have earlier blunted the curve, meaning we would have closed our borders and implement social distancing and so on very early. However, because COVID is transmitted COVID is transmitted by person to person. And because there's a risk of importation of illness, the risk to the Caribbean remains high. And what do I mean by importation? Well, you know what is happening all over the world. Right now, the US is the #1 country, has the highest amount of rates, and that's followed by Brazil. And last night I saw India has now been as a number three country in terms of numbers. All over the world, the numbers are very high. It is quite different to the Caribbean. It's almost like the Caribbean is a bubble because our cases are low, and the way that this, because we have put early measures, the way how COVID can now re-enter into our region is through travel. So while travel is our most important economic activity and we need to do it, we have to make sure that we are putting measures in place to protect ourselves and our travelers so that we ensure this, that we stay relevant and that our tourism economy stays resilient. So how is this bug transmitted? Well, we know it is spread by person to persons, but we need to know some other things. First, it is spread from 2 days before a person starts to show illness symptoms until 14 days after the onset. So you're looking at between a 2 to 14 day period of incubation, we call it. And it's because we know it can be transmitted during this time. This is why you have this whole thing about that 14-day quarantine. And I know people says, well, why should we stay isolated from others for 14 days? It's because we are likely to be transmitting at that time. Of course, it varies, in the beginning, your viral load or the amount of virus will be higher. So that person may be at higher risk of transmitting. And as you go down to the 14 days, it may reduce. Transmission occurs very different ways. First, when someone coughs or sneezes, those tiny droplets actually transfers from the person's nose or mouth onto someone who is near to them. So that's why it's important, again, because we know when someone is coughing or sneezing, that the droplets can be transferred to someone else. We tell you to social distance or physically distant, meaning stay 6 meters or 6 feet or 2 meters apart. And because of that too, we say to wear a mask. So it's not that, we know it is difficult to wear a mask. We know it's difficult to stay physically apart, but this is a barrier for protecting you as well as others from getting infected. So it also spreads when a person coughs or sneezes onto a surface, and then it may stay on a surface for a period of time, and I will go through that period of time for different surfaces. And then when someone then touches that surface, you know, like desk and door handles and tabletops and so on, they may then touch their eyes and their nose and their mouth, and then they pick up the illness. The thing is, we may go around with it because there may be mild cases, but the person who then pick up, or the person who we may sneeze upon, or who may touch a surface that we just sneeze upon, they may be a vulnerable population and be able to, and would have a severe or critical illness that results. So we also know too that it may be spread by bodily fluids like blood or sweat and so on. So this is why if your mask is getting wet, you want to change anytime your mask becomes moist. And also the virus may be spread by persons who show no symptom. This is a difficult one because a person could look completely healthy and still be transferring. So we have to be even more vigilant with our prevention measures. Now, to date, we have no evidence that COVID is spread by water, mosquitoes, or food. So what do we look for? Well, the first symptom we tend to look for is fever. And it's fever accompanied by one or many of these other symptoms. So this is why we do temperature checks. We want to make sure if someone has fever, then that's our first indicator. And they may have fever, they need to have fever with something else. Fever with shortness of breath, or fatigue, or dry cough, or muscular pain, or all the above. Now, these symptoms could also be very similar to dengue and other illness. So this is why we also need to test. The cough we see is not a liquid cough like when you have the common cold, it's a dry cough. So all of us has to become kind of like disease detectives to look out for this among ourselves, as well as the persons who are going to come into our accommodation setting. The other thing we need to know though is that the illness severity varies. Most of the cases are mild. What does that mean? I may have a slight fever and I may just have a little short cough, and it may not look like I'm ill, and I will get better with a couple of days. So most of the people, because we are not testing everybody's, people may be going around with COVID and we may not know. So we need to know that, and this is even another reason why we need to wear our masks and social distance as much as possible. The problem is that if I may be a mild person and I'm transmitting and I'm hugging and touching other persons, and I am coughing and I'm not wearing a mask and so on, I could transfer that to a vulnerable population. Who is a vulnerable population? Someone who is older than 65 with some underlying illness, like heart disease or diabetes. You know, the Caribbean has a lot of obese persons, so all of those persons are more at risk. So I may transfer that to them, and they become a critical case. And that is the ones we need to worry. We have seen a lot of deaths in the US and in UK and so on. And we have seen that in the Caribbean too. People died. Last night I was looking at the television and there was a young, very healthy entertainer, 41 years, and he died too. He had also an underlying illness. So we need to really be careful and to understand that, you know, that it could be transferred and someone could become critical. How long can COVID stay on the surface? Well, the data that we know so far, it stays on cardboard for about 24 hours, wood and cloth for 2 days, glass and banknotes for 4 days, and plastic and steel up to 7 days. So how does this apply to you? We're in the recreation setting. So we have to make sure that all the things we are doing in terms of recreation, that we ensuring that these surfaces are clean and sanitized, and that we are not allowing for any COVID then to be present, or reducing any presence of COVID on these surfaces as much as possible. So this all comes down now, because we know how COVID is transmitted, it all comes down to how do we really prevent. And I think this is the most important slide if we take nothing back. We prevent by keeping apart. So, you know, social distancing became very popular, but it's really physical distance or staying apart as much as possible. The minimum amount of space is 2 meters. or 6 feet. So you want to stay apart so that if someone is coughing or sneezing, then obviously you are not picking it up. We cannot overemphasize hand hygiene. So when someone sneezes, they sometimes touch their mouth or their nose, and then their hands become infected. So you need to wash your hands often, carefully with soap and water. And if you cannot have soap and water, you can use an alcohol rub, but we prefer soap and water followed by sanitizing. If you're coughing or sneezing, you want to cough into your elbow to ensure that you're covering, or you cover with a napkin. If you are sick, seek medical attention. We cannot overemphasize that too. Any kind of sickness like that pertains to coughing, sneezing, fever, seek medical attention, stay at home, and of course, wear your face mask. By wearing that face mask, you are creating a barrier. You're creating a barrier to protect yourselves and to protect others. And then what is not here is all the different hospitable things we like to do. So things like greeting someone through handshaking and hugging and all that, that's no longer possible right now during COVID time. So while we wait on a vaccine, we have to kind of refrain from that, so knock the elbows and tap your heart and so on, but refrain from hugging and kissing. So some specific things for our recreation, we have these types of infographics that are there that you can use. We also have, the whole thing with employee hygiene and health and hygiene, hand cleaning, training, making sure you have your personal protective equipment, that is your gloves, your mask, your hairnets, and of course, stay home if you're ill. And I wanted to just go through this quickly. Hand washing is not just simply going to the washroom and just rinsing your hands. The whole hand washing procedure is to remove those dirt, and then the sanitizing procedure is to remove any bugs. So we have to wash our hands properly. It must be done under running water. You must have liquid soap, and you must have some drying facility. So you wet your hands, you apply that soap, and you rub your hands thoroughly. From your wrist go up to your fingertips, under your fingernails, and so on. And that whole process of the hand washing, scrubbing your hands itself, takes 15 seconds. And the whole process of hand washing from wetting your hands to drying is 20 seconds. Why am I saying that? Because this is the science that has been proven. You need to scrub your hands for 15 seconds. So the best way to do it, Sing Mary had a little lamb, oh happy birthday. So it keeps you going in terms of the time, you want to scrub your hand. After you finish, you rinse your hands, you dry with a single towel, and then you use another towel to turn off the pipe, and you can use that same towel to open the door. Once you finish wash your hands, you can then use a sanitizer. If you don't have a hand washing sink immediately next to you, always have sanitizers, and in this case, the sanitizer comes like your soap. So using the same thing, and you're rubbing your hands and so on. The only difference with the sanitizer is that you don't dry off the sanitizer. This process takes 20 to 20 seconds as well. And the recommended sanitizer by WHO and by CDC and so on is to use a sanitizer with greater than 60% alcohol content. This is ethanol or isopropanol, not methanol. So I want to just emphasize that. So as we talk about the hotels and so on, we want to ensure, you're now in the whole recreation, you want to ensure you have sanitizers, you want to ensure you're doing the temperature checks, that you are making sure you have signage and designated areas to drop offs and pick up. These are some nice signage here in terms of recreation. When you have like, your recreation, a lot of these hotels tend to have movie nights or other nights out. It's nice to actually put up signs, and there's an example. Okay, things that we want to ensure too. You want to avoid handling cash. We spoke about that. If you are handling cash, you want to wash and sanitize your hands and clean and disinfect. And we need to create barriers. So again, barriers for infection, not just your mask, but also other barriers in terms of plexiglass and so on. Okay, so I'm gonna go on a bit further. I've spoken about some of this. We can have this available, providing temperature checks, ensuring patrons are washing and sanitizing your hands, wearing face masks, having floor markings, to ensuring physical distancing, ensuring all your equipment and tour materials are clean and sanitized. So things like, you know, your depending on whatever recreation activities, cleaning and sanitizing between use is important. I want to emphasize this. Your pool areas and so on, it's no longer good enough just to clean in the morning and clean in the evening. Because we know persons can now sit and they can transfer it to the pool chairs or to any kind of equipment they're using. Once someone has used something, whether it be a beach ball, whether it be a pool equipment, you know, paddles on the boat, snorkels on the boats and so on, all that then has to be clean and sanitized properly before someone else can use it. Okay, so for our water and sports, you want to sanitize your vessels, high touch areas. Your rafts and other vessels should carry persons of the same family as possible. And of course, you want to limit your number of passengers to avoid the crowding. In your pools, all persons should wash their hands or use hand sanitizers, and you adjust the capacity of pools again to allow for your social distancing. So yes, we cannot have a full capacity because of course, once there's crowding, there's a risk. Okay, again, in true recreation, you want to organize your seating to allow for social distancing and wearing your mask, cleaning and sanitizing. And finally, now we're coming down to the end. In all of this, I want to let you know, CARPHA is doing monitoring of illness through our rapid and system, real-time early warning and response system. It's called the Tourism and Health Information System. This system is just capturing illness in real time. We do not need to know your name and so on, where you're from. All we need to know is symptoms. And you all are all disease detectives, as I see, in terms of really being able to report this. There is a self-reporting tool. You can actually report if someone is ill, or you can go on and register. You see this Google Doc information here, so that you can report. The good thing though is all these registered facilities will be listed, you know, as healthier, safer hotels or practicing healthier, safer measures on our Caribbean Travelers Health app. So these are the instructions. You register, and once you register, you will get credentials, you log in and you report it. Or you can do, if you're a visitor or if you cannot register, you could also self-report. This is our app here. It's up and live. We need to put up the address on it so that you can download it. And in this app, it tells you about the different alerts. So you would see COVID, you would probably see a dengue alert on this. You can search by destination, Trinidad, Jamaica, Barbados. And what it gives you, it tells you not just the list of the hotels that are registered, which is important. It tells you, you know, health facilities, will tell you travel and health prevention tips, and if you want to report an illness. So I want to thank you for your time. I know I've gone over my 10 minutes, sorry. Please feel free to contact us or contact us through CTO, and we will try to answer as much as questions as possible on the question and answer session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Indar. Thank you for taking us through that session so that we are very clear on the importance of the health and safety measures that need to be in place. I now invite Ms. Joan Leacock to take us through the checklist, which I would have mentioned to you earlier. And please note that the guidelines and checklist document will be made available to you after we finish today's sessions. They will be posted on the CTO website. Okay, so Joan, over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Can you put it on?
Can hear me? Yes, I'm doing that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Great.
Yeah, good morning. I hope everybody can hear me. I'd first like to congratulate CARPHA and the task team force in order for them to harmonize and support the tourism businesses around the region. They've worked very sterlingly well together in order to put this framework of guidelines and protocols in place. I think they've done a sterling job, and I think it's very quickly as well. Something that Dr. Indar had said, that we put early measures in place, and that made it so much easier for us to contain the scourge of this pandemic. But I'd also like to congratulate the Caribbean region. Everybody deserves a hearty applause in their management of operations in containing this pandemic, and I believe we're the envy of a lot of regions around the world. But of course, we cannot continue to be complacent. We really have to keep the measurements in place, the protocols, the guidelines, and our communication strategy is key, ensuring that everybody who comes onto our borders, onto our shores, is aware of what we require them to do. Okay, so today we're covering sites and attractions. The manual, as it said earlier, will be available on all the various websites of the task team. And tomorrow, I believe we're actually having the accommodation sector being discussed by CHTA. So please pass that information on to your friends and other colleagues if they're interested in that particular sector. At the end of my presentation, we will be inviting Kelly Meissner from the Dolphin Encounter in the Bahamas to share how they've incorporated the guidelines to their business. But without further ado, I'd like to start the presentation. So the overview: sites and attractions are critical elements of the recreation entertainment subsector of tourism. They are generally placed, just move this so I can read everything, generally places of interest and activities at the destination that inspires visits by providing memorable leisure experiences for an admission charge or even for free. For me, what's critical in this is that despite all the extra measures we have to put in place, the value chain, the touch points still have to remain, and they're key with regard to continuing the operations of the said sites. So here we have, very simply, waterfalls, forest reserves, national parks, volcanic springs, caves, monuments, botanical gardens, museums, art galleries, buildings and structures, old plantation, treks and trails. Now, if you look at those individually, waterfalls, invariably you will have a tour guide taking a group of people. And again, we have to look at the measurements in place, the guidelines and the protocols. How big is that group going to be? How manageable is that group? Is it from one particular family, one particular cruise ship? Do we have to limit our numbers? All these things you have to know, and also make sure that the people, the agencies involving themselves in what you're offering has an acute understanding as well. Everybody should be wearing masks. So if you're working at a waterfall or forest reserve, there are masks or shields. Face shields is another thing that people tend to do. And I know lots of companies now have invested in face shields as well as masks. And you have to ensure that your staff are well equipped with their PPE. So it's not just masks, it might be gloves. If you're helping somebody over a trek, under a bridge or whatever, your tendency is to want to hold them, grab them, whatever. If you're wearing masks and if you're wearing gloves, there's an added protection to yourself as well as to them. Volcanic springs, it may be running water, but you still have to be wary of the types of infection that could be. But running water is a good thing, because obviously, you know, we're always being told to wash our hands, as Dr. Indar has said to us. Caves and monuments, again, with regard to caves and monuments, when any opportunity there is to touch something, you have to be mindful of that. Obviously, in a museum, it's slightly different. You might have exhibits where you can press buttons and the exhibits move. So if that's the case, you need somebody nearby to spray to keep it clean. At the entry of any site of attraction, you need sanitation, either vessels or wipes or something, so people can make sure their hands are clean. And I'm assuming that everybody in the Caribbean now know that there are certain places like supermarket and banks where they have either a screen to protect the staff, to protect the customers, as well as a walkway or a signage, floor markers, where people are only allowed to go up to a certain point. So we've started to incorporate these things with regard to protecting our whole environment. We just have to be more vigilant to continue it. So again, moving on to art galleries, limit the number of people, like in museums, that come to the exhibits. You can't have a whole crowd. Before, you'd get lots of school children coming in the summer holidays to museums. Again, now you have to limit that. Museums, I understand now, are doing things by virtual. So they're talking about the exhibits and the staff are trained in giving virtual interviews about the exhibits. So, you know, there's ways and means of getting around and still allowing people to see what you have to offer. Buildings and structures, forts, old plantation homes. Again, you've got tour operated, other agencies who are involved and add to the experience for the guests. So they too have to be protected, and masks, shields, gloves, whatever means you need to put into place. So water-based attractions, they should go noticed because they're quite popular, especially in the Caribbean. And a lot of the sites and attractions, you'll find either all of them or some of them in most countries in the Caribbean. So because of that, different things need to be put into place. Now with boating, glass bottom boats, deep sea fishing, again, they're limited by numbers as well. That might be further reduced. With regard to before you get onto a catamaran, there might be a disinfectant mat. We know that when you get on the catamaran, invariably you have to take your shoes off. Your shoes are then put into a basket. So if they're put into a basket, maybe you should wipe your feet on the disinfectant mat. They're put into a basket, they're sprayed in the basket, they're put on board somewhere safe. The persons who then enter the catamaran, they are confident that the catamaran and the glass bottom boat and the deep sea fishing is clean, it's been sterilized, it's been disinfected. So therefore they feel there's no contamination there. With regard to food that is provided, with regard to deep sea fishing or submarines or catamarans in particular, you have to ensure that the agencies you employ to provide the food, prepare the food, have to have their protocols and guidelines in place as well. You can't just have yourself safe and coordinating accordingly without having all the link businesses that you are involved in not doing what they should be doing as well. So we also go into diving and snorkeling. Dr. India did mention the fact that, you know, you try and encourage people to bring their own equipment if you can. But failing that, all the equipment you provide to your guests, to your visitors, you know, ensure it is clean and sterilized highly. And if you give it to them, you sterilize it, and then you let them keep it until the end of the trip. If they return it, you sterilize it again, and then at the end of the trip, you take it away and you clean everything again. So you have to be extra vigilant and incorporate a lot more sanitation methods in place to ensure there's no transgression and there's no infection crossing borders. Water parks and aquariums. A lot of the countries in the Caribbean, a few have water parks, and therefore, again, you have to have sanitation creams and bubbles and also tanks available for when people get in, they sanitize their hands. When they get out, they sanitize their hands again. Bathrooms, change rooms, all these things have to be doubly cleaned in order to make sure there's no cross-contamination of anything. As Dr. Indira has clearly said, sometimes you don't know when people have these things. So perhaps a business might have to invest in a temperature gauge and then train their staff in how to use it efficiently. There's lots of things you have to be aware of. If somebody's sneezing, if somebody doesn't look well, if somebody looks okay and then they feel a bit ill, you have to make sure you keep a note of this, make a report and submit it later. Because we have to do track and change in that you have to track what you see and it has to be reported. So those are the things you need to be aware of as a small or a large business. So regardless of the description or type, the recreation and entertainment subsector, and specifically sites and attractions, must facilitate the health and safety of all staff, independent contractors like tour guides, tour operators, patrons, and visitors alike. Therefore, the communication strategy is absolutely key. You have to have that everybody who comes into your area, into your site, into your attraction is aware of what you put in place. You have to check that they have those things in place as well. Because there's one thing I know, there are a lot of people out there who are dying, literally, to come to the Caribbean because of how we've managed ourselves so efficiently. I have friends in the UK, I have family in the States who cannot wait to get out. That is a worry, because obviously we have to make sure we transfer messages to them to ensure they understand the measurements in place. We've started by having an embarkation and disembarkation card prior to travel, where individuals have to present proof that they have been tested. These things are starting, and I think we have captured a very good way of ensuring that we remain safe as well as our borders remaining safe. So our focus today is to ensure safe working conditions for employees by being extra vigilant and observant. And you cannot ignore vigilance and observation because it's acutely important that people now have to be profiling and looking and seeing what is going on. Because I know to a certain extent, I've seen here in Barbados where people have come into a shop and they're visitors or people who live here and feel they don't have to wear a mask. And I've seen staff desperately say to them, please, will you put on a mask? And they have to comply. And it's actually being vigilant and providing a healthy environment, but still keeping your touch points and your value chain at the top of your relationship with your patrons, customers, tour operators, agencies, etc. Because we still want visitors to enjoy the common points of experience at the sites and attractions, but we still want them to be very aware of what we're trying to put into play. Right, so therefore communication at all levels is critical. It has to be in line of what the customers are expecting. So if you are taking a coach load, or not coach load, a few people from a cruise ship that may come in later on in the year, and you're saying you're restricting 20 people to your site and attraction, the cruise ship, the coach, the tour operator must know that, because you can't let them get to your site and then you embark the information to them. They should know all this information prior to coming to your particular site or attraction. That is key. So the common points of the experience, and I'll just go through these very quickly for you. Walkers, tour guides, patrons, and operations. Policy and procedures. Policy and procedures, SOPs, standard operation procedures. A lot of people have those in place already. You just have to add to them with regard to the health and safety regime you now have to implement. Training is my forte. So again, it's about ensuring staff have an understanding, have the knowledge, and know what to do in the case of an emergency, in the case of ensuring that customers, patrons understand the measurements that are in place, the guidelines and the protocols. And hygiene and health and safety, again, CARPHA has fully explained very well all the things you should be looking for and all the things you should put in place. But I will go through some of the guidelines pertaining to sites and attractions a little later. Arrival and entry, admission. Now we think about admission with regard to payment. So payment, how you pay, should be a separate, invariably it's a separate booth or whatever. But what you're trying to do is encourage people to pay online or use credit cards, because we know money can contain the virus for a lot longer than you anticipate. So invariably, you perhaps need to provide your staff who take money cards with gloves. And the gloves should be obviously changed on a regular basis to ensure there's no cross-contamination. Plus, I've seen people using gloves thinking that they protected their hands, but they use the gloves for everything, like eating or whatever. And just washing your gloves is not enough. You need to throw them away when you don't need them and then put on new ones. So you could avoid little issues like that by having sufficient gloves to ensure that you don't harm yourself, your patrons, your guests, and your family. The tour activity and management. Now, we talked a bit about capacity and crowd management, which is key. A lot of sites and attractions in the Caribbean do have crowd management specifically in mind, and they have that as part of their SOPs as well. However, you now have to be more mindful that before you would have 60 people on the catamaran, you might reduce it to 35 because of you can't have close proximity of people. Plus the fact numbers are always changing. There was 10, then it was 15, then it was 25 with regard to how many people can form a group. Now that is gone up to 35, 50. So again, you have to refer to your national guides, your National Ministry of Health, etc., who have guidelines for you to follow in your particular country. And again, these are just checklists for you to make sure that you are keeping up with what's required to keep everybody safe. Tours, activity equipment, PPEs, if you provide equipment, ATVs, etc. ATVs are those bikes that people use to get around. They have to be cleaned. Once you change them into somebody else, the handles, anything that has a hard surface has to be cleaned. Anything that can be touched has to be cleaned and disinfected. After each person uses it, at the beginning, at the end of the day, you have to harmonize and make sure that everything is kept solidly clean to ensure that everybody is safe. Because what you want is people to feel confident that you are doing the right thing. And if the staff adhere to it, your guests and patrons should also as well. Observation or activity stops. Those are primarily if you're doing a tour and you're on a coach and it's a small group, you stop somewhere for, I don't know, a drink or something. Again, that activity stop should understand what the requirements are. There might be a walkway, there might be a limitation of numbers. If there's a group there already, you have to wait till they leave before your group goes in. All these things you have to be mindful of because it's very, very important to ensure that the common key points of experience are not compromised to such an extent that people get ill or they feel somewhat blighted. Key facilities and services, restrooms, lockers, that's staff, as well as if they're going to a large marine park or a pool, the lockers have to be cleaned. Keys have to be put into a basket once they're locked and cleaned again. All these things you have to be mindful of. It's a lot because the individual who's responsible for making everything COVID-19 ready has a lot on their plate from a health and safety perspective. You've got merchandise, you've got food and beverage, all those things. Anybody who impacts upon your experience or you're giving your experience to other people, you have to ensure that they are aware that their protocols and guidelines are in place as well. Tour equipment, PPEs, could be also with regard to, as I said, snorkeling equipment, diving equipment, all those things have to make sure they're clean. What you should also try to do is encourage people to bring their own. If that's the case, then of course, then that takes away the responsibility. But of course, you still have to clean things around them. And photography, yes, obviously, if there's photography, the idea is it's so easy for somebody to say, would you mind taking a picture of us? If the staff are wearing gloves, not a problem. So it's things like that you have to be vigilant about. Okay, so I'm going to cover 4 main areas. We're going to look at management operations, human resource and training, my area, health safety measures. We're going to touch on that because CARPHA, Dr. Inda has done a sterling job at explaining that, and communication, messaging, and signage. So I'm going to change the system now, and so you can see it a lot clearer. So bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm now going to pull this up. Can everybody see that? Everybody see that?
We're still seeing the same screen, Joan, the PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, correct. All right, hold on. Okay, so you are, so I've got to go here, share. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, good, great,
Thank
fantastic.
you.
Okay, hold on. Hold on, I've done something, touched something wrong here. Excuse me. Hold on. I think I touched something wrong. I'm trying to get it back for you. Okay, right. Okay, read mode. Right, so everybody can see this clearly?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Right, great. So what we're doing here is it's a checklist, it's a summary of the recommended guidelines. Let's move this out of the way. And its key element. It allows a self-check for comparison and to ensure consistency with and coverage of core areas given size and nature of the operation. This is primarily useful for large, small, and medium-sized businesses. A lot of businesses are not necessarily nationally owned. Some of them are privately owned. So this allows private enterprises to also utilize these things, put them in place for their management of their site of attraction. So we're starting off with management operation. As I said, again, all these guidelines will be available on all the task force websites, so you can pick those up in a few days' time. So make sure that your COVID-19 preparation plan is in place, just like your hurricane plan, your COVID-19 preparedness plan is in place. And also have a health team or a point person to ensure that everybody is COVID-19 compliant. Okay? And these programs will help you do that. So going through it, so having your standard operating procedures, looking at making sure there's a tour cancellation policy in place, having information SOPs about physical distancing, infection prevention and control for contracting tracing, track and tracing, a health screening policy in place for staff. All these things you should have an idea of what to do. So going on to capacity evaluation and hand hygiene installations. I'm not going to touch much on that because I think Dr. Inda was very clear on what you should do with regard to hand washing, sanitation stations, contactless hand washing, all those things. It's very clear and the information was there for anybody to see. But again, having your PPEs and making sure your staff is well equipped is very important. Shields is something that's very popular now. Especially people who are working in close proximity to groups. And then your first aid measures as well, making sure you address any symptoms. Having a temperature gauge is a very good idea as well. And having all the appropriate PPE equipment. Okay. Moving on, we're looking at procurement management. Again, very straightforward. Face-to-face purchases, transaction is reduced, try to increase online purchases, supply PPE and cleaning supplies, and make sure that people get them promptly with regard to staff, making sure you have a PPE supplies list, all those things you need to have in place. And also for contractors or agencies who impact on your service, make sure they know what's required as well. Some HR management training, this is dear to me. So again, once you effect a COVID-19 SOP, have it in the handbook so all staff know what's expected of them. Also, the sick leave policies with regard to COVID-19 have to be reviewed and updated. Shared equipment, you have to consider these things that are very important. Computers, phones, radios. You might have to just basically say, this telephone, this computer, whatever, is for this person's use. They're responsible for cleaning it, or you have office staff come in and clean it every night, every day, just to keep the area sanitized. That is key and very important because you have to show willing to your staff as well. Touch surfaces on the equipment should also be sanitized frequently, and that could be a desk where a receptionist is sitting. All those things have to be cleaned. So having sanitation wipes, sanitation liquid, etc., all these things have to be in the premises, on the premises for people to utilize when they need to. Customer service heightened. Now, because we have COVID-19, obviously it's very important, and whether it's a script or not, you have to train your staff effectively and efficiently because they have to understand what they need to do and what the guests or the patrons need to do. So the customer service, as I said, cannot be compromised. Your value chain and your touch points have to be acutely higher than they were before, because you want people to remain confident in what you're giving as a service, happy that you're, and make sure they abide by the rules, the guidelines and the protocols, but they have to be mindful that you are delivering this, or your staff's delivering this in a way that shows care, sympathy and empathy. So measurements in place to decrease physical contact and time of physical contact. So we're talking about, again, floor markers. We're talking about online promotional marketing staff, decreased physical presence. Whereas before you might want to give somebody a hug, you have to think twice about that. Your staff should wear gloves. Maybe you're tapping the elbow. I think it's an opportunity for everybody in the Caribbean to be very intuitive and also ingenious on looking at different ways we can say, you know, hello. We are very creative, so I think this is another way we can do that. And also using online platforms as much as possible when it comes to training, when it comes to exchange of money, when it comes to giving out information. We have to increase our use of electronic means of communication. Training delivery, again, a lot of this is being now conducted virtually. I myself have been doing virtual training programs. Thing is, it's challenging to try and make it interactive and exciting. And you can't see the person who's fallen asleep in the room, but you try to incorporate different methods and tools to keep it engaging. Collaboration for training taken with Association Ministry of Tourism and Health. So basically, every time you do a training program, you might have somebody come in from your ministry to talk about COVID-19 and the things you need to put into place. So collaborative working together is key. We have to coordinate and execute efficiently. Training areas for staff include SOPs, new management operational plans, policies and procedures, identifying COVID-19 symptoms, respiratory etiquette, and personal hygiene for infected prevention and control. That is a mouthful, but basically that means is ensuring that when somebody is coming in front of you and they seem to have the symptoms, how do you go about telling them, A, you can't take them, B, that they look ill, C, we will get some help for you, or whatever. How do you go about that? Who do you contact, etc., etc. So we need to put these things in place because we can't just leave people to their own devices and ignore these things, because it then puts everybody in a position of infection. New IPC cleaning and disinfecting protocols for the area of work, wearing the correct PPE for the activity, suitable PPE for cleaning, for disinfecting, for sanitizing, and for food service, and ensuring safe removal and disposal of PPE. Something that Dr. Indah said earlier about you're wearing a mask and it's wet, it is no good to you. You need to get rid of it. So it's also having those PPEs in place to ensure that your staff can go and change them as and when they need to. Having the sanitation bottles or whatever available if they need people to wash their hands. Also staff perhaps having their own method of their own PPE. Actions to be taken in case they or patrons present symptoms. Yes, that's all to do with the etiquette training. Handling suspected COVID-19 staff and patrons. Again, all to do with etiquette training. But also, if staff are ill, you're not going to encourage them to come to work because they can infect somebody. They might not show the symptoms. Their family might have it. If their family have it, they should stay home. They might not show the symptoms, come to work and infect somebody else who is more vulnerable. So we have to be so vigilant on these things at all times. Codes of conduct, a list of expected behaviors for staff and operations. Codes include when to stay away from the workplace and what action to take if they become unwell and what symptoms to be concerned about. Selling skills in the new reality of social distancing for brand staff. How do you sell your site and attraction? How do you get people to come to see, to virtually visit? You have to be very creative in doing this. Of course, first aid application and other things, cross-training of employees, so they can operate in more than one area. A lot of staff in the past have always said, I want to be able to cross-train. I want to be able to work in X, Y, and Z. Well, now's the opportunity for management leaders to say, you know what, we need to double up on staff to make sure they can work in different areas just in case somebody becomes ill. We have to really think outside the box and be creative in how we do this. Admissions and entry. The arrival and departure. I'll just pick out a few things here. Space is designated for drop-off and pick-up of patrons. A lot of these things are already in place. So it's about the numbers and the spacing, not mixing two different groups together. They go in one door, come out another. That sort of in and out process needs to be put in place. Signage is clear and visible. We cannot stress enough. Many times in the Caribbean, people who visit the borders of the country say, the signage is not very clear. The signage is not there. We have to make sure that the signage with regard to COVID-19 and the guidelines and the measurements are in place to ensure that everybody understands what role they have to play. Some things have been covered already. COVID-19 waiver and disclaimer signage is clearly noticeable on arrival. Luggage is included in any entry contracts forms signed by patrons. So again, if people have left a bag on board a boat or whatever, It's like making sure that you clean the handle, you spray it, and then you hand it, you have your gloves on. Just little things like that that will protect you and protect them. Ticketed and admission. Now, we know for a fact that we're trying to do everything online. So if your site or attraction can take things online or via a credit card online, that is the preferred way to go. Obviously, if that is not possible and people pay by cash, please ensure your receptionist has gloves to take money. As I said before, because money can contain the infection and be passed on very easily if they suddenly touch their face, their hands, or any part of their body. So ticket counters have to be wiped down on a regular basis after each customer's interaction and throughout the day with shift changes. Again, that goes with payment, how people are paid. Locker and storage facilities, when you have a water park, when you have a swimming pool, all those things have to be protected, cleaned on a regular basis. And also you have to have your sanitation bubbles and sanitation liquid everywhere, not just one place, but everywhere. And as I said before, with regard to the catamaran, perhaps having a mat that has a disinfectant on it. So when they walk from one threshold to another, be it a pool or whatever, they can wipe their feet on that. So at least they're not bringing anything in and contaminating anywhere else. Restroom and changing facilities, again, this is for staff. Make sure sinks and toilets with touchless valves or flushing devices are installed and utilized where possible. Pay extra attention to high-touch surfaces in restrooms, toilets, doors, soap dispensers, sinks, taps, all those things you have to be mindful of. If there's any way you can use your arm or your hand and then wash them afterwards, that's fine. Or that sort of like timed water dispenser is a very good idea. Again, thinking cost might be a factor, but I think it's better to be safe than to be sorry. Reusable hand towels are removed and replaced with disposable hand towels dispensed from a contactless dispenser. Okay. Tour management now, general. Temperature checks are required before assessing a tour site or participating in a tour. Proper physical distancing, ideally 6 foot between individuals. But you know, things are subject to change. Some borders have now reduced it to 3 foot. So again, look at your national protocols and see what things need to be put in place. But these, as I said, are guidelines and they're recommendations for you to look at and consider when you operate your site or attraction. Again, we're talking about based on the activity, land-based or water-based, tour guides wear masks, except where submerged in water. Well, obviously, that is obvious. But again, everybody should be wearing a mask to ensure that they remain safe. Physical contact is necessary for tour guides, and they're required to wear disposable gloves. As you know, when people are pointing, touching, or whatever, gloves are ideal. And again, individuals should have their own alcohol-based sanitizers if they can for their own personal use or for their colleagues' use, etc. Physical distances of tour guides from each other and from patrons, unless required for the tour activity, like zip line. Well, obviously, you know, you're going literally very close after each other. But again, you have to put signage in place, measurements in place for people to understand what they can and cannot do. Tour material equipment used, including pens, are sanitized after each use, or let them keep it. You know, if you give out pencils or whatever, let them keep it, short pencils or whatever. I know it's a cost, or if you do let them use pens, make sure they are cleaned afterwards. So again, we've got adventure sports, rides and water sports. The number of passengers per water sport vessel is limited to 60 to 70% capacity to allow for physical distances. Sanitize water equipment after each use, life vest, snorkel, kayaks, pedal boats, banana boats, deep sea fishing boat, all things like that. If a raft or other ride vehicle accommodates more than one guest, that vehicle should only carry members of the same family or household. On catamarans, you don't always get that. You can't have a big catamaran taking out 5 people. You will have 2 or 3, 4, 5 groups, couples, family groups, you know, big groups. Maybe the catamaran company has to rethink that and say we will take 4 separate groups to make sure it's 25 maximum and ensure that people are sufficiently distant, socially distant, to ensure there's no problems there. Patrons are offered disposable gloves for use if required. Patrons using handrails must sanitize their hands before use, are reminded to sanitize afterwards. Again, on boats, banana boats, deep sea fishing boats, glass bottom boats, all those things have to be put in place. All their rides where they sit has to be sanitized as well. So volcanic springs, pools, hot tubs, again, regularized sanitation and maintenance are adhered to. All this is fairly straightforward and self-explanatory. Again, things are adjusted 70% of full capacity. Patrons required to rinse off, shower off before entering the spring or pool. All these things, I believe, are in place already, but now you have to be extra vigilant to ensure that people do those things. So walking through exhibits and museums, entrance and venue capacity are carefully monitored to ensure patrons can maintain physical distancing within the space. High-touch services and view windows are frequently sanitized. Photography, tour guides are encouraged from taking photos using guest cameras or phone. So, you know, wearing gloves would take away that issue. Equipment is sanitized at regular intervals. Photographers use hand sanitizers. We've got food beverage service. Again, shared water refreshment stations are eliminated. You can't have a water pump. You know, people are given water separately for that. So all those things you have to think about. Dining tables, stools, and tables are sanitized after each use, before, after each use. Reusable menus have been replaced with single-use, disposable paper menus or menu signs. And we're trying to come back on paper use now, but you know, maybe we could do it, put it in the perspex and clean it off afterwards so you still have something hardy in which to use. Retail and merchandise, again, all sales are final until further notice. Some items are placed in paper packages to reduce handling, facilitating the sale. Hand sanitizers, again, per plexiglass barriers to separate staff and patrons, as we are seeing now in supermarkets. Customers are required to only touch what they intend to purchase. It is very difficult to monitor that. It is very difficult. Cash wraps, physical barriers, phones, handling knobs, and hard surfaces handles, and frequently touch surfaces are sanitized frequently and upon shift change. Okay, so I won't touch the specific health measures because I feel that has been covered very, very generously by CARPHA and Dr. Indar. I will go straight to communication. And communication assures patrons that operations are in a manner that minimizes their health risk. And this is about us communicating with the right patrons, with the staff, with the people who use or come into our area, into our site or attraction, making sure they understand what process we put in place. Awareness building is in place to ensure that patrons and staff fully understand the adjustments. Communications are done prior to the arrival of patrons through the attraction's website and through social media to establish expectations and instill confidence. People want to know what to expect. So if you tell them, should be no problem. And of course, facility signage program, signage is key. Have signs everywhere you need to have them so people are aware. So they can't say, well, I was not told, I did not see. It has to be clearly defined, almost like Disney. Everywhere there's a sign, okay? So let me now come out of this, ladies and gentlemen, bear with me. Come out of this, and then go back to the right, okay? And now going back into my other. Did everybody see this?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so we've covered management operations, human resource and training, health safety measures and communication, messaging and signage. But the priority areas which we've covered are capacity, density, and crowd management for physical distancing and patrons, personal hygiene for staff and visitors and patrons, human resource management and training, which is key. You have to bring people up to date with regard to what is required of them. Quality customer service and care. Despite having all these things, these new measurements with regard to COVID-19, the value chain to touch points are still key. Utilization of touch-free content-less payment options are something that has to be implemented. Reduce face-to-face purchase transactions. assurance, confidence building, and communication, and collaboration and partnership between not only your site and attraction and the agencies that impact on you and your national government, etc., but throughout the region. The Caribbean have been remaining in a bubble. They've worked very well to retain that reputation. If we all work collaboratively together, we should contain that. And finally, remember that this checklist is a summary of the recommended guidelines and its key elements. It allows a self-check for comparison and to ensure consistency with and coverage of core areas given size and nature of the operation. So everyone has to work to the same code to ensure our collective ability is not compromised. We have to collaborate, plan, coordinate, and execute effectively. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Joan Leacock, for taking us through the checklist and the guidelines. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, the document for the recreation and entertainment sector is fairly thorough, it's fairly comprehensive, and we will be making this available to you, as I had said, in our website, on our website at www.onecaribbean.org. That should be available by the end of the day. So I want to thank Dr. Indar and Ms. Leacock for those presentations. And now we look forward to hearing how a business has been able to utilize the guidelines and checklist, assisting with what they would have already been putting in place to ensure that the attraction that they're offering, the products and services, are keeping themselves safe, their workforce safe, as well as their visitors safe. So we introduce you once again to Mrs. Kelly Meister. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you very much. I guess good afternoon, everybody. I'm coming to you from the Bahamas, and in case it happens again, our internet has been going in and out. So I'm using my phone, and I can't share anything with you, but I can certainly speak to what we've been doing since all of this has happened and how we have incorporated these amazing guidelines into our facility and our company. So just to give you a little bit of a brief background as to what we do, we are Blue Lagoon Island, which is home to dolphin encounters. And so what makes the guidelines really incredible for us as well is we're many different things. So in order to get to our island, you have to take one of our ferries. So we're in transportation. When you get there, we have several amazing animal programs. So we have to look to our keeping our staff, our guests, and our animals all safe. We also have beaches. We also have restaurants. We have retail outlets, and we have photography. So what these guidelines do is they speak to every point of what we do as an operation. Now, we take great pride, Blue Lagoon, and having put guidelines very early in place, because before really most of the Caribbean shut down borders, the Bahamas included, we were operating and receiving guests. And I would say we took it all very seriously from the very beginning, but we put pretty radical measures in place very early, I think earlier than a lot of other companies, requiring masks very early in February. We were requiring masks and temperature checks, hand sanitizing. We had hand sanitizing stations all over our facility. We were, giving out PPE, and it was very early on. But even then, it's not enough. But we were really proud to have done it earlier than a lot of other places. And ever since that day, we've just continued. So we've actually helped and worked together with others that are actually on the call with our company's guidelines for tourism and attractions. And we've looked obviously to international guidelines with the WHO and the CDC, et cetera. But nobody can do this by themselves. And I don't think anyone has the answer. And the best part is to look to everyone. And as the other presenters have said, is to work together. And I think that is the most important thing that we can do, particularly in the Caribbean, because as our other presenters have acknowledged, we've done a tremendous job in containing and keeping numbers low in this region. And we should all be very proud of that, but this is not the time to let our guard down. And so, believe it or not, our borders in the Bahamas opened on July 1st, but tours, attractions, and excursions, we are not permitted to open until July 13th. So there are tourists coming into our country, but they're not coming over to our facility not until the 13th, or is anyone allowed to open. But in a way, as hard as that is from a business standpoint of view, it has given us tremendous time to prepare for that. And I feel that all of us that work in this industry will become sort of the frontline workers in a way, because we're dealing with people coming from places that may have tremendous more spread than we do. So we have not taken this time lightly, and we've worked very closely with our staff and our management team to ensure that we can do so open in a way that will be safe for everyone. Because I cannot share my screen, I just want all of you, if you're interested, to write down our social media. We're at Blue Lagoon Island on Instagram and Blue Lagoon Island on Facebook, as well as Twitter. And I think the important thing and what we did was to let our staff know what we're doing and why we're doing it. It's not enough to just say to someone to wear a mask. You have to explain why you have to wear a mask, what it's going to do for you, and how to properly put it on, and how to properly take it off, and how to properly disinfect and clean it. So in order to do that with all of our PPE, because depending on where you are within our facility, you'll have different. Some people will have just masks, some people will have masks, face shields, and gloves. It all depends on where you are. We also have put in so many measures, but seeing is more believing. So if you go to one of our social media, especially, I think we posted it on June 18th on any of those, you will see that we did a video. And we're showing everyone what the measures that we have done and what we have put in place. And we have received tremendous feedback on that video. And guests are really looking forward to returning, because they feel that we are going to be doing things, in their opinion, in a very safe way, that they feel that they can come and, as safe as possible, come and enjoy the great outdoors. And that's the beauty of what many of us do in this industry, is give beautiful outdoor, lots of space, lots of sun, and that's considered a bit, as long as it's all socially distanced, etc., a safer way to enjoy an attraction. So you can look at our video if you choose to do that, and you will see what we're doing in that regard. I think communication is really, really key, and we found that to be very successful with guests. What we did, in fact, just this week with every one of our staff, we actually had a doctor come to speak to our staff and to train us. And I think that's critically important. And we got that from the guidelines that were presented today as well. A doctor, they're going to take their word from a doctor even more than myself or HR or even the manager of why it's critically important, and that to keep the spread minimized, that we all have to work together to do this safely. So with the doctor, she came and she showed us all how to put on the PPE, how to take it off, how to disinfect it, and more importantly, why. And she gave a tip that I'm going to share today, because we hadn't thought about it. And that's why I think everybody working with every guideline, sharing information, that we can keep each other safe. And what she said is, we're not, obviously nobody's hugging and we're not shaking hands, but she also says she does not recommend the elbow bump either, because that is the location that we've been told is a good place to sneeze during this time if you're not around something that you can sneeze into. So she said this bumping isn't always the best thing, because if someone has sneezed, you're bumping. So I thought I would pass that along. So we are going to do a lot of hand waving, and a lot of sort of namasteing moves, because I think we're all great communicators. And if we do so, we will be able to communicate with our guests and our staff that we're welcoming them warmly, and that, we wish them the best. And I think that's critically important as well. To speak specifically to the guidelines that you were presented today, like I said, we've done a tremendous amount of research and work ourselves. What I really love about the guidelines is they are incredibly thorough, really impressively thorough. And everybody thinks that they're doing things to the best of their ability and that they've got a lot of it covered, but there is always room for improvement. And the checklist associated with the guidelines has been critically important for us and our team as well. It's very, very detailed, and you know, with all the guidelines that we've seen and we've been putting together from all around the world and from our country as well, and we were even a part of putting together those guidelines for our country as well, there's still a lot of detail in this. And I think working together, we can all keep each other safe. And I don't know if anyone has the correct answer, but as we work towards it and as we go through this pandemic together, we can all help each other to keep each other safe. So I won't keep you any longer. I won't, take any more of your time, but thank you for letting us speak today about how our company has used the guidelines. They have been a big part of our plans, and we are grateful to be a part of it, and we're thankful to have them. And I hope everyone that receives them finds them the same way, because they are very, very thorough. So thank you to everyone that played a part in putting them together. They're definitely a part of our plan.
Thank you very much, Kelly, for sharing Blue Lagoon Island's experience in terms of what it has been putting in place, but also how what they have been putting in place, they have been able to support that with the guidelines that have been produced by the COVID-19 Caribbean Tourism Task Force. And once again, a big thank you to the members of that task force that have taken the time to ensure that they could pull on the best practices to help guide our businesses through this period, so that when we reopen fully, that everyone will have a measure of confidence in terms of operating and in terms of offering the service that we are known for, the quality service. So thank you again to all of our presenters. And Sharon, do we have any questions at this time? Oh, so most of the questions have been answered.
Yes.
What I will do, you do have a couple questions?
No, they've all been answered.
Okay, so I just want to highlight a couple of those questions because some of you may also have similar questions, and you can hear some of the responses. So we'll just be another couple of minutes. There was a question about what is the impact of the virus in an air-conditioned facility where persons are working or dining or just present. And the response coming from CARPHA is, the available evidence indicates that one, there's several bullet points. Transmission of COVID-19 commonly occurs in closed indoor spaces. So you would hear a lot in the guidelines. A lot is mentioned about outdoor or keeping windows open for airflow. They have also said there's currently no evidence of human infection with COVID-19 caused by infectious aerosols distributed through the ventilation system ducts of HVACs. Now, the risk is so far rated as very low, but it's important to have well-maintained HVAC systems, your air-conditioned systems, to have those units maintained regularly and to ensure securely filtering large droplets. So that was one of the questions that was posed, that I'm sure there are several types of attractions that are enclosed that have air-conditioned facilities. Once again, let us just share with you that the guidelines for this subsector will be available on our website, and the link has been placed in the chat, so you can access it from there. And if you're not able to do that at this time, you can check our website, www.onecaribbean.org. Sharon, you were going to say something?
There are two questions. Should open air transportation have the same 70% limit? That's the first one.
Should open air transportation
have the 70% limit? I think that may be a question for CARPHA.
CARPHA.
Hi, it's Onala here now. In terms of this, the recommendation is to consult with the individual country, because while we understand that, once it's open air, the risk is kind of reduced in terms of transmission. Once we're dealing with any sort of ground transportation, we tend to tell people to access the information that their authorities are giving out, So I know, like, for instance, in Trinidad, every time we have the press updates in terms of the country status, etc., the Prime Minister has been increasing the capacity for ground transportation. So that is what our recommendations, at least for Trinidad, would reflect. So for now, we would recommend that they utilize the capacity that the individual country is recommending.
Thank you for that.
Second question, will there be local inspections of sites to ensure they meet the requirements?
That would be something that a destination would have to determine if that's the direction that they're going to go in. That's not something at a regional level that we can inform, but it's something that your Ministry of Tourism or National Tourism Association or organization could perhaps consider, but we can't really speak to whether that is something that is happening, but it's something that could happen, could be a recommendation.
There is another question. Is CARICOM encouraging a regional standard for regulations for AC and indoor spaces and provision of PPEs by employers?
I could kind of speak to that. Even before COVID, CARPHA, in collaboration with CrossQ, had developed 7 regional, what we call hospitality, health, safety, and environmental standards that are now being ratified before it is now adopted as CARICOM standards. There will be some revisions to address COVID-19 issues, but once those are ratified and approved by CARICOM, they will now have the CARICOM hospitality standards where that would fall under.
Okay, thank you for that response. I believe that would be it. Some people were just asking for repeats of certain aspects of CARPHA's presentation as it related to how long the virus could remain on certain surfaces, and that was answered. Please note that the presentations from CARPHA and from Joan Leacock, as well as the checklist, will be made available to attendees. Okay? And ladies and gents, I believe that is it. If there are no other questions that are coming up in our Q&A, just to say a big thank you to all of you for attending. It's important, as all of the presenters reinforced, that we continue to work together, pool our resources and our information and our knowledge so that we can all go out there confidently to do the job that we love in this tourism sector and to remain safe while we do so. Thank you once again to our presenters, Dr. Indar and her team at CARPHA, Ms. Joan Leacock, Ms. Kelly Meister, and a big thank you to my colleague Sharon Coward for taking us through this session to ensure that we were functioning and hearing each other and seeing presentations well. So wishing you the best as you go forward with making your plans. And we will have another session this afternoon for another group of folks coming out of the recreation and entertainment subsector.